Welcome everybody to our next webinar, helping staff to flourish in a changing work environment. And hasn't today been a weird old day, and certainly an apt topic to be able to discuss today as we move into more uncertain times. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we all respectively meet. For us down here in Geelong, it's the Wathaurong people, and we pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. We do so wherever you stand today, joining us to those peoples. I'd like to thank our good friend Don Shields from Geelong Insurance Brokers for being our online premium monthly partner. Thank you, Don, and I hope you're joining us today, as well as Pixel, our platinum partner, and all our corporate partners who allow us to do what we do. I'd like to welcome everyone today, all of our members and non-members, and all of our guests, including our directors who are joining us as well. I'll introduce our guests in a second, but before I do, I just want to remind everybody that this is a 30-minute webinar, and please use the chat or Q&A function below if you've got any questions at all. We love questions from the audience to spice things up, and we've got some great guests today, and they're certainly looking forward to hearing from you as well. So I'll just go through our guests just to remind everyone. We've got Tracy McPherson, who's the Manager of Therapeutic and Children's Services at Bethany, but also more aptly the Manager of the Employee Assistance Program. Welcome, Tracy.
Well, thanks.
Stephanie Beard, who's the GM of People at Harwood Andrews. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you.
And David Williams, who's the Psychology Services Manager at the Cats. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Ben.
So, Tracy, if you don't mind, I'll start with you, being on the front line of the Employee Assistance Program at Bethany. What trends and what have you seen over the last 18 months in relation to the real challenges we're facing?
Yeah, some of the challenges that the trends and challenges that we've really noticed is the increase of people seeking assistance through the Employee Assistance Program, and really finding that the presenting issues are really around relationships, homeschooling, trying to build some resilience. And I think that as we move forward through COVID, we've actually seen an accumulation of challenges and a little bit of anxiety, and just really trying to support people around that, and to give them the skills and strategies that might be able to get them through.
And how many calls do you think you take a week at Bethany EAP?
We're averaging at the moment about 10 a week. We have 35 businesses that we work with in Geelong, across Geelong. And we've really seen a real increase in people accessing the service, which is fantastic because they need the support and the help.
Yeah, fantastic. Well done. And Stephanie from Harwood Andrews, as a really large law firm, and you've got a great perspective too, because you're in Geelong and Melbourne. Yeah. And I'll ask you about that difference shortly, but how have you adapted as a professional organisation to the current environment?
Look, I think we've adapted pretty well. We had a lot of infrastructure already in place, the technology piece, so that was really important. We never imagined that we'd have to have everyone working remotely. We had a lot of things walking out the door, screens, keyboard, mouse. It was hard to keep up. But yeah, everything's gone pretty well from that point of view. But I agree with what Tracy said. You know, COVID has added another layer to what some people may have been experiencing already, and there's different experiences from everyone. So you've got to listen to them and connect with your people and understand what they're going through.
Yep. So how do you think your staff have adapted, Stephanie, to working from home in that transition?
Look, some people love it. And some people don't love it so much. I think, you know, there's a bit of anxiety, as Tracy was talking about, feeling of isolation for some staff, especially in Melbourne. We had some junior staff that were in one-bedroom apartments, and with that harsh lockdown, that was really hard. So there's not that organic learning where you can turn around. We're fairly open plan and ask a question. So you have to be more conscious of picking up the phone and asking questions. So I think you know, pretty well they've adapted, but I think a lot of anxiety about, you know, the opportunity to continue to learn from, you know, their supervisors and managers.
And as a GM of People, have you needed to offer additional services to staff along the way?
Yeah, we've got an EAP service that we've had all along the way, but we've added other things, you know, like webinars, how to navigate, you know, through a changing environment, webinars on nutrition, added bonuses like vouchers for people to spend on Amazon or Booktopia or something like that. We said at the end of the year, go out and have a good experience with your family and let us know what you did, and we'll refund you up to, you know, a certain amount of money for that. So things like that as well.
That's very generous.
Yeah.
And David from the Cats, really big question. So how would you describe the last 18 months within the AFL system?
Yeah, I think if you had to pick a word, Ben, you'd probably just say agility, because it seems like you've just set processes up to try and outrun wherever wherever the virus might appear, whatever government restrictions would then follow in order to keep a system rolling. We were fortunate enough to be able to be in an industry where they were collective and agile enough to say, right, let's quickly implement some changes so that we can keep the show rolling because of the jobs as well that are attached to that in what's a pretty big sport, really.
Now, coming into last year, there were suggestions that there was a bit of an asterisk against the 2020 season, but I argue that Richmond, who was successful, and certainly Geelong throughout the year, there's no asterisk against your performances. The challenges that clubs face was extraordinary, and I suppose you know, how would you describe, what would you put behind the reason for your success, given, you know, the changing circumstances?
Yeah, I think it was my first year at the club last year, and one of the things that immediately jumped out was that the thing that they held pride of place is the value they place on people.
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly, when COVID started to take flight in Australia, and we saw what the ramifications were going to be in Victoria, there was a massive emphasis on people first, no matter what. And so members of our executive coterie group, and then supported and reinforced by the players who'd already taken a pay hit, set up a food bank drive for staff and families. No names required, just turn up, pick up a meal and go. And they extended it and kept it going for a whole year, because they said it's about protecting people first, and we'll take care of that, and the performance will take care of itself and look after the people. So I think the part of the recipe there was actually being able to put people at the front and work out how you can meet them where they are.
Yeah. And no doubt the players had the same challenges that Tracy outlined, homeschooling and so on. They're not just footballers, are they? They have lives, and being away from their families must have been extremely difficult at times.
Absolutely. And one of the things that was a challenge too is what we've championed over the last 5 years has been this increase in, I guess, in developing wellbeing capacity. So things like work-life balance and an outlet away from the game and those types of things. So engaging in study and whatnot. All of a sudden, that game of golf that was your chance to catch up with your non-footballing friends, that was gone because you weren't allowed to do it. The players had to live under stricter lockdowns even after conditions moved. So yeah, working away from family, leaving and travelling interstate as we went through last year, and the restrictions that followed with that, it just changed the way that you would prepare and cope week to week to be able to play.
And no doubt, you touched on it already, but no doubt culture played a super important role. And when things get pretty tough, I suppose culture either boils to the surface or drops to the bottom. And you would have seen that in the AFL system last year as well.
There's an old saying in sport, which they've probably stolen from organisations, which is what we do with most things, but that sport doesn't make characters, it reveals them. And I think these scenarios that we were facing in the sporting industry, particularly in our code, probably revealed what's already under the surface, at a rapid rate, because it exposed when you're under pressure, how do your policies and practices stand up and how do they adapt?
Yeah. And I suppose just generally, do you think the concept of psychology in sport has been brought more to the fore over the last 18 months and will continue to sort of grow in importance in years to come?
Yeah, I think so. I'm fortunate enough to, in addition to this role, I actually co-manage the psychology services for the AFL Players Association, which is essentially like an EAP for all people who've played the game. And we're the largest mental health service in Australian sport. Wow. And so you get a chance to look at things a little bit more globally from an AFL point of view, but then as a practitioner working with athletes in different sports, you're watching again. So the panoramic view has said to me that there's an increased appetite, there's increased employment opportunities, and so the funding model that's going into health and wellbeing suggests that likely we'll see an increased, I guess, emphasis on how we utilise the servicing going forward.
Yeah, well done. I'll come back to you in a second, David, but I want to go back to Tracy because I'm interested in the EAP program locally and the kind of people that you're seeing coming through. Are they staff or managers or business owners, Tracy? And are people sort of really, are there some people that are more susceptible than others?
Yeah, look, it's everyone who has the opportunity to access it. So there's no demographic, or there's no, we have seen, a trend of increase of males accessing the service, which has been fantastic. And we're just really working with people that are varying, like some staff that we found have been really resilient, but some people have really struggled. And there's been a lot of struggle, especially last year when we had the big lockdown with homeschooling, people wanting to get their teenagers out of the rooms, doing lots of work around gaming and all those types of things as well. So we've just seen there's no particular cohort that presents. We've just had a really, really broad cross-section of people that have been able to access the service and be supported by their employers to do that.
Yeah, okay. And you know, business owners and managers and, you know, fathers and mothers and everyone, what kind of symptoms can we kind of look out for if we see people struggling?
Yeah, I think that the anxiety levels of people is increasing. I think what Stephanie was saying before, social isolation has been a really big one for people, especially during lockdowns, or even, you know, with restrictions around, you know, when we have restrictions. Yeah, there's such a big gamut of symptoms, but yeah, anxiety levels, I think people identifying their relationships, like, because they've been really brought together. Some families have thrived in the environment and some families have really, really struggled in the environment. So it's just really supporting them and people being aware. And I think it's, you know, workplaces having health and wellbeing programs and talking that it's okay to get help and get support has really helped people to reach out and know that, you know, they need to get some skill set or some strategies to support them.
Yeah, okay. And from your perspective, what kind of advice can you offer to business owners or managers who are, you know, I know it might feel a bit different today, but who at some point will be encouraging staff to come back to the office? What care should they take in communicating and working with staff to be able to do that?
Yeah, I think this environment's really taught us as managers and business owners and leaders to be a bit more agile and flexible. And I think listening to your staff, because their fears are real, and trying to just work with them and support them. And, you know, we talk about flexibility. There are some industries that flexibility is really hard to provide. And so just really supporting and listening and being really transparent, I think, in your communications.
Yep. Now, on the flip side, you told me beforehand that you managed to get 51 staff out of the office in 30 minutes today. So what was the general feel amongst staff as they left the office today?
Look, I think we've built an agile workforce now. Everyone was able to just pack up and get their stuff and go. Obviously, we'll do check-ins over the next couple of days to make sure everyone's set up and supported. But I think that with that fear and anxiety, I think there's a fear and anxiety around the staff that here we go again, and that it's kind of like an accumulative trauma is supporting them in that. But I think we have built a resilient, agile workforce as well that are able to kind of go home and set up and keep working.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Stephanie, you know, Harwood Andrews has quite a few hundred staff. How will you go about the challenge of encouraging staff back to the office, and how will that look down the track?
Yeah, we've gone for a hybrid model. What we did is we put it down to the individual teams to get together, and we really encouraged our managers and principals to talk to their staff and understand what they want, but also to be honest in talking to them about their expectations about what that hybrid model may look like. So there may be a rule of thumb that looks like 3 days in the office, 2 days at home if you're working full time. But the importance of really just communicate. That's the key thing in all of this over the last 18 months. The more communication, the more face-to-face that you can have, whether that's through team meeting, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, whatever you're using. But really ask and really listen to what's happening in the individual's life, because everyone's going to have different experiences and everyone's going to have different needs. And for example, you know, like I said before, the junior lawyers in particular, most of them want to be in the office 5 days a week. So make sure that you've got enough senior people in the office to provide that mentoring and supervision to them. That's a real key as well. So we haven't had a lot of pushback. It's worked really seamlessly. We've got a worksheet that shows everyone in the whole firm what days they're in and what days they're not in.
Yeah, okay.
But of course, these things that come about today sort of flip everything a bit on their head. So, you know, you just got to be agile and flexible in every way.
Now, I've certainly noticed in the last 12 months that people are a lot more likely to talk about their own mental health and the mental health of their staff, but more to the point, some of the strategies they have for managing their own life enjoyment and that of their families. But having, you know, you're a HR professional. Have you noticed the same kind of trends? And is wellbeing really central to any HR strategy now?
Oh, absolutely. Wellbeing should be in any event, but even more so now, because like I said before, you know, some people had a pretty full bucket before COVID. And, you know, adding that layer of what's happening with COVID, you know, increase that anxiety as well. So we have really encouraged our staff to check in and talk. We, you know, encourage to have team meetings and not just talk about work. Talk about what's happening, you know, in their personal life. I think from a HR professional point of view, the one thing that I've missed, I'd see a staff member in the kitchen, I'd just check in and say, hey, how was your weekend, or how's things going? They may say, oh, I had a crap weekend. You know, my mum's sick, she's in hospital, or my baby didn't sleep all weekend. And you get a lot more insight. When we're working remotely, they're not going to ring me and tell me that. It's sort of trivial stuff, but it's trivial stuff that matters, because it gives me insight into what's happening into their life. So that importance, we did a lot of work from the HR side of things to keep in regular contact with all our staff.
Yep. Well done. And David, I suppose, you know, AFL clubs they're large. You have a huge ecosystem around you. It's not just the, you know, 48 players on the list and their families, but you have all of those staff as well. Is there a difference in the approach or what you've seen in terms of the players and the staff over the last 18 months?
Yeah, there is, and there probably is by necessity in our industry, because the players actually, it's a little bit like a high performance school, for lack of a better term, in that you've got all of these teachers or coaches and wellbeing staff, fitness staff, medical staff are all around there centered on players and establishing an environment that's optimal for a player to learn football and thrive in and receive health support at the same time. From a coach or a staff point of view, they don't necessarily belong to an association like the players do, where there's external staff available in addition to the internal facing staff. So a lot of the initiatives that were set up for staff, particularly at our club, were designed to try and meet them where they are. So that is, if they were having challenges with managing people or their team underneath, how do we actually support them in looking at managing remotely? But we had to actually bring resources in specifically for that was sort of separate off, whereas I'm actually part of a staffing unit that the players identify as going, oh, he's here for me. They also have the Players Association I mentioned before in addition to that. So it's quite a large workforce focused on players, and the difference being, I'd say, is from a player's perspective, definitely would be thinking about their friends and family, how they're impacted, but a lot of their week-to-week focus is on them and how are they preparing themselves as best as possible and all their peers. From a staff perspective, a lot of their focus week to week is on their players or on the people that they're there for. So it's almost like they're always looking out as opposed to looking in, and the players, we're teaching them to look in before they look out. So the servicing needs probably mirror that basic philosophy.
Yep. And tell me, you know, the guys in the club who are on the list, it ranges from, you know, you recruits who are, you know, 18 years old right through to your older guys who are 34 probably at the moment. Did you find there was, you know, really different challenges with the different age groups within the team?
Yes, and also because of the fact that when you're first drafted into a system, likely you're coming from interstate,
Yep.
or you're coming from a different part of Victoria, and so you might be a first-year player that moves away from their family for the first time, and then when borders have been put up, that may mean that in the past where we could send them in and out of home for a weekend back in WA and then back into the club, that now gets removed. And we can't bring their parents in and out as well. So there was some challenges probably that were relevant to where you sat in the fold. Whereas the player that's been in the system for nearly 10 years, all of their family unit might be around here. They may be living with them already. Different challenges though, because they might be working and homeschooling their children. So lots of variety in what we saw across a playing group that's sort of segmented a little bit by age and therefore generation.
Yeah. Now, last year was a real success and it was really disruptive. I have to ask, are the players more settled this year? And does that give us good optimism as we lead into September?
always optimistic. From my perspective, I think it means they're more experienced. They're more used to what we've seen our guys do. Is our guys were away from home for 110 days. Last year when they were initially told at the start, look, it won't be much longer than a month, was the general rhetoric in the industry, but it just kept going on and on. So what it enabled us to do from a cultural point of view, and because it's credit to our staff and the people that are in driving the program, was it enabled us to say, be ready for anything, anytime.
Yep.
And to know that if we have to go long, we can. And we'll make policies and practices to support that. So we were able to bring family in when there was hubs that were running last year where we thought that was going to be critical to do so, to reconnect the family units. And players that didn't feel like they needed that were able to sacrifice their allocation to allow other players to bring more family in. So there's a definite, there's a thinking about the person next to you mentality that's in there with our group that I think helps us to be ready to adapt for whatever may come ahead.
Yeah. Now, Australia's an island, but certainly the AFL is no island, and no doubt you're learning from some of the other sporting codes. Do you think wellbeing has become more prevalent across NBA, NFL, all of the, EPL, all of the codes?
No doubt about it. I actually was lucky enough to be on a World Players Association call earlier in the year, and some of the things that they were talking about as issues that were now front and centre for them have been things that we've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years. So I think even though Australia is an island, our obsession with sport and our fortunate, ability to be connected to university partners and whatnot actually has enabled us to probably be a little bit faster in moving forward and looking at how we utilise wellbeing in the performance space and how we're focusing on early intervention and prevention rather than just reaction as it relates to mental health. So I think we're probably in advance of some of the other sports, and they're then taking it and utilising that in their own countries with bigger budgets. So it's great to see how that manifests around the world. NBA in particular, they've got a close affinity with some of the practices we have in the AFL.
Fantastic. So, Tracy, coming back to Bethany and EAP, but what do you think are some of the most significant changes to workplace as a result of this pandemic? What have we learned?
I think we've learnt to use online forums. Everyone went home and no one, I think, 18 months ago even knew what Zoom was. So actually increasing our knowledge of use of technology and how we use that, how for us in EAP and at Bethany, it's given us a broader reach to reach more hard to reach communities and supporting people. I think the other thing that we've learned is, as we've already talked about, is being much more agile and flexible. But I think it's also created a change in our culture. So we're actually looking now, businesses are building cultures of trust and transparency and trusting that our staff are working and doing the tasks that they're supposed to. And I think that's some really positive things that have come out of it. But I think the technology, embracing technology and utilising that technology in even in doing these webinars and things like that is really something that 2 years ago we would never have thought of that we're probably doing. We'd all be off to a network meeting or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah. It is amazing, but I will ask Stephanie, because I've heard along the lines that business owners and managers are also concerned that the technology is invasive on people's lives, and you almost have to ensure that they have that separation. Is that something you find, Stephanie, in Harwood Andrews?
It's something that you have to be mindful of when you're talking about well-being. You know, even just the whole working from home, you know, there's no triggers to say it's time to pack up or it's lunchtime. People tend to push through and can get on the technology. Look, I think one of the other things, you know, that we've learned, and you can't replicate human connection face to face. You know, as much as we try, and we have to at times because of the circumstances, the number one thing, we did survey our staff, and the number one thing they said they missed was that social interaction. So, you know, I think that's a really important piece of this. But, you know, it's going to be a more digital world, which in some ways is good. There's less hard paper, you know, files and less printing and things like that. And the other thing is, you know, what we've really learned is flexibility works. You can't trust your people. And when there's high levels of trust, everyone's productive. And, you know, we're busy, everyone's working well. So that's been a real positive for us.
Now, we touched on change fatigue, and I think it's very real. I think we're all feeling that today as we're waiting for more announcements and so on. What recommendations, I'll start with you, Tracy, what recommendations can you give for business owners and managers and anyone really to be able to, you know, manage change fatigue and you know, and find their sense of purpose?
Yeah, I think really just having open and transparent conversations and keeping your staff's well-being in the forefront of your mind, and just really being able to have those conversations and listening and acknowledging your staff's challenges and fears, but also thinking about how that impacts on your business or your agency as well, and making sure that you're able to, you know, have that flexibility to keep them in the forefront, but actually meet your KPIs or your outgoings or whatever it might be that you need to meet as well. I think that's really important.
Fantastic. Now, David, directly from the prospective 2021 premiers, what piece of advice can you give to business owners that they can replicate in their own industries?
It's a good moment for reflection. I think from my point of view, sometimes there was an old management thinking pattern that was there that said what you can't see, you can't manage. And to Stephanie's point, flexibility we know works. If you're not seeing it and you're not communicating with people, there's probably some feedback. There's some data in that suggests that there's organic relationship lines that will be there in person. If they're not sustained and that you have to actually actively seek people out, that's data. It's letting you know that saying, who do I spend most of my week talking to? Who do I spend most of my week prioritizing scheduling with? And who am I missing in my organizational chart? Because if you spend your whole week just talking to the person who lives in the office next to you, traditionally, you may be missing a whole heap of data from the floor. So it's important to try and use that reflection to reveal your blind spots, I think.
Yeah, it's certainly something we've learned at the Chamber. We used to do a lot of events face-to-face, which were great, but we found the same members were turning up to those, and the other 50% of members who didn't turn up didn't get as much value. And we've suddenly got all these online services that people are really enjoying and are urging us to keep. And we've suddenly created this whole different audience. And so that's one of the learnings we've got. Stephanie, just finally, what's the number one piece of advice you can offer business owners and managers in the current environment?
Do what you should be doing. Continue to build positive relationships with your people. That should be happening whether it's through a pandemic or not, but more so now. Take the time to show a genuine interest and make them feel like, you know, there's a bigger purpose and meaning for what they're doing. Provide feedback. Listen. Ask good questions. I could go on and on. I've got heaps.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will say that it's very important, and you'll hear from the Chamber more on how important having a COVID-safe plan is in the workplace. And no doubt staff do appreciate that and knowing how they should respond in the given circumstances. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. I said 30 minutes would go quickly, and it certainly has. We could probably talk forever. But Tracy McPherson from Bethany, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Stephanie Beard from Harwood Andrews. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Ben.
And David Williams from the Cats. Thank you, David, for joining us today.
No worries. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, ladies.
Ladies and gentlemen, have a great afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.